We are ready. Hey, so welcome to this edition of Blind Ambition with Jack Kelly. And I have an amazing guest today, Jayesh. And what I want to do is just hand it over to you to give a little bit of color about what you're doing now as an SVP with Salesforce and kind of a little bit, how did you get here? How did you get to be this AI guru way before anyone else was really on the bandwagon?
Well, Jack, thank you for having me on the show. It's a pleasure to be here. A little bit about myself. I'm Jayesh. I lead Salesforce AI organization on the engineering and the data science side. So a lot of products we build on the Salesforce ecosystem that infuse AI into the daily work. Also, the platforms that we build that serve these amazing models that change how work is done is work that my team is responsible for. That's sort of what I do at Salesforce. My journey here, I'd say, has been I came into Salesforce through an acquisition. I had a startup that focused on AI, machine learning, large-scale data science on text data. So natural language processing, which is the foundation for a lot of language models. This was a small startup in Palo Alto that got acquired by Salesforce, and we came into Salesforce, and the team helped build out a lot of the technologies that are used in Salesforce. Before that, I held, like most other executives in Silicon Valley, I've done my stints at startups and big companies, building large-scale systems, and then going and building entirely new startups from scratch. That's my journey getting into Salesforce.
Just when you started with data and AI, this was like about 8+ years ago. And to my knowledge, from an outsider perspective, that seems to be early on. I mean, AI was out there, but we don't have that gold rush that we have now. So were you kind of one of the forerunners in terms of AI back then?
Salesforce certainly has been a forerunner, but even before Salesforce, my sort of introduction, if you will, to AI and machine learning, which is an amazing tool in any software arsenal, has been through search. And I truly believe that search is such a crucible of innovation for AI. A lot of AI systems, natural language processing systems, transformer architectures that are the underlying technology for these large language models. Large language models themselves have, a lot of them have history and were birth based on solving search problems. And I think search is such an amazing crucible for innovation because it brings together lots of sort of disparate things that require AI to work in sub-second response times and at scale. Imagine what happens when you type a search query. It understands who you are. It understands the intention of your query. That's a natural language processing component. Fetches results back at scale from billions and billions and trillions of documents, and to just those documents that you care about. That's targeting. And once you have the results, it ranks the results based on your propensity to click on something. That's also an algorithm for ranking. All of these systems, are an amazing crucible for innovation for building machine learning systems. So my sort of foray into AI has been through search. And at Salesforce, my team built one of the first machine learned search ranking algorithms that is still being used today. And broadly, I'd say from an AI perspective, about 8 years ago, we launched our first sort of set of Einstein products within Salesforce. A lot of these Einstein products were envisioned as in the flow of work type systems, which is imagine you're an account executive at any of the companies that use Salesforce today. The leads that are ordered and the order in which you call your customers should technically be based on sorted by your propensity to close the deal. So there's a lot of data that goes into building that predictive model. If you want to predict, if you need to predict the ability to close a case, is also another predictive model. These are all systems that are in the flow of work. One, two, are predictive in nature. So that was sort of our first foray in Salesforce, is to build this in the flow of work systems for our customer, do it with trust, do it at scale, do it with safety top of mind. And these are systems that generate close to 8 billion predictions a day, massive scale. This was about 8 years ago. And then maybe about 2.5 years ago, we got into the whole transformers game, which is how do you understand language? Some of the state-of-the-art systems at the time were transformer architectures. So if you talk to Salesforce's Einstein bot system as an example, which is deployed widely, many thousands of customers, and you use the chatbot, that's Salesforce's technology, that leverages the first generation of transformers, which is based on BERT and other technologies. And then over time, that transition, and about 2 years ago, we looked at what we were seeing in large language models, which was just incredible. And we quickly pivoted towards asking, hey, how does this new technology come into the enterprise? What do we know to be true, and what do we know to be unchanging? And one thing that's unchanging is that customers want this to be in the flow of work. They want this to be deeply integrated into their data stack. They want this to be safe. They want this to be trusted. They want this to be per tenant and personalized. So these things sort of remain the same. And the team worked to bring all these technologies into the Salesforce stack. And what we've launched in the last year and a half is a testament to just how fast the space is moving, how quickly teams need to reorganize to bring these technologies in such a way that creates impact, is of true value to customers, and users derive value every day.
Jayesh, now you're so immersed in this space. So to you, it's just, hey, this is every day. But for myself, and I would hazard to say, for most people, it's mind-blowing. How do you, without all the tech kind of jargon, but just how is it that you can get an index so much stuff that when you put in a query, whether it's with Salesforce, Einstein, Perplexity, Claude, Google Gemini, whatever it may be, within like a nanosecond, you can get your response. I mean, from a non-techie kind of guy, it seems just amazing and like magic that you put it all together. How, is there a simplified way of explaining to the audience how is it behind? If like you pull back the curtains, how does this all work? Because it just seems amazing how you can get so much information so quickly, so efficiently.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think one way to think about this is to stop thinking about this as search problems. So and stop thinking about the prompts that we type, the instructions that we give the system as search queries. They're not search queries. They're in essence instructions. And the engine is not searching. It is actually composing an answer to that question, which is a subtle but important difference. Search is the answer exists. I need to go
So
find
search
the
is
answer.
different. Like, so I'm using the search, that's old-fashioned Google search, but this is something complete. This is
something.
So what do you call that? So you were referring to as what, prompts or?
Yeah, the instruction and the large language model is basically completing your instruction. It is taking an instruction and going, how do I craft a response to this instruction? And that crafting of a response is actually a composition, which is it is writing the next token. And
How does that know? Like, how do you know? How does it know to do that? Like, how does it know if I'm going to say, I'm going to, and it fills in home? And how'd you know that?
Yeah, that's a great question.
Right?
Let's do a simple experiment.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask you to complete a sentence for me.
Okay.
Jack says, I'm hungry. I want to
Eat lunch.
You completed the sentence, right? And you did that because you have what is, in essence, in your mind, a world model. You were able to complete that sentence quite accurately based on the simple context that I gave you, which is the first prompt, and you completed the sentence. Imagine an engine that has seen literally every word that is on the internet, right? So there's a lot
So,
of
but then
that.
how would it know, like instead of saying lunch, saying, dog or just something, or it's just after a while and you have just so much data and so much information and it's running so often that you can get the better answers. Is
You
that,
can get better answers
yeah.
over time as you train on more and more data. There are emergent properties. It learns a probability distribution across every word and picks the right word for the right context, which is why I think the other thing to understand is like that's the base large language
Mhm.
model, which is basically a completion model. It completes the sentence just like you did.
Mhm.
That's necessary but not sufficient. And there's a lot of information and magic in there, but really what made this work is the step that came after that, which is instruction tuning, right? The ability to complete sentences is great and a good party parlor trick, but really what you wanted was the ability to follow instructions. When you give it a very clear instruction on go write an email for me based on this background, and these are all the prior conversations. Following that
Mhm.
instruction required further teaching of the large language model. So you started with the base large language model, then you instruction tuned it so that it could follow human instructions in the right way. And that was what sort of led to this moment where ChatGPT launched an instruction tune system. And there are many techniques to sort of do the instruction tuning, but broadly, you're teaching the engine that is able to complete sentences very well based on the knowledge that is acquired. You're teaching it to follow instructions, right? This is what I call the first wave of large language models. And people, it blew our minds when ChatGPT launched. But if you remember what it did at that time was do reasonably good summarizations, write little poems, and maybe complete some documents for you. Those were largely what we call language tasks, which is summarize, write a document, work with long form text and short form text, which is incredible in its own. But then the technology moved in the last, 6 months, and the large language models we realized have more than just the ability to interact with knowledge and generate knowledge. They are able to reason, they're able to
Mhm.
plan, and they're able to predict the next action, which is phenomenal because now you can go register functions with it and then have it orchestrate functions on your behalf.
So now, is everybody sharing the same data set, or Salesforce has its own way of doing it? OpenAI has their own way, and then so on. How is that working?
So the data sets, so there's a common crawl data set, which
Mhm.
is pretty much shared by open source large language models. It's like in the LLM space, it's like a Cambrian explosion of large language models. As you can see, there are open source models coming out every day. Llama 3 came out from Meta yesterday. And a few months ago, Mixtral was another company that came up with an amazing open source model. All of these are based on data sets. Um, the first data set was the common crawl data set, which is the open internet crawled. But then over time, a lot of these, both open sourced and closed sourced companies, are creating data sets that are wider, that have more
Mhm.
representation. And that's a differentiation that each of these companies and models have. So those are different, I'd say. So the the data that goes into training models is different. The way it is tuned is different, which is why we have the diversity of models that we have right now.
And what I've seen, I've interviewed for some Forbes pieces. People are using it to have AI recruiting, for AI job seeking. So it's you can have the large set of data models, but then also it seems like a lot of niches are forming where people are just focusing and taking all that data and it's recruiting, it's hiring, it's a job search. And do you have any sense of where this all is going to go? Like, is it going to keep escalating, or is it going to plateau, or like is AI going to take over all jobs? They not create jobs? What's your I know you don't have a crystal ball, but what's your sense of how things will play out?
Yeah, I mean, I think the rate at which things are going, it's hazardous to look into the Palantir if you to use a Lord of the Rings reference. Uh, I'd say I think there's two aspects that we should sort of explore. One is like from a technology perspective, where is this going? And then what does it mean to builders and how to build? And I think that's sort of one track. And then broadly from a user's perspective, people that use this technology on a daily basis, what does the world look like for them? And I think, I'm an optimist, and I feel like, while there is going to be change, I think the change is going to be for the better. People will build higher sort of tools with higher degrees of abstraction. Taking just the cohort of people that I'm the closest
Mhm.
to, which is people that build technologies and build products, our lives have changed as well. There's a lot of technology that is built for builders themselves. Things like copilots that enable you to write code better, be able to test code better, and be able to bring code to life better. Um, the way we build and distribute software is slowly changing. Slowly now, but rapidly soon. We used to deliver software as sort of two-dimensional user interfaces with buttons and toolbars and such. I think that's changing because now you're building and shipping assistants that can wait for instruction, that can proactively execute an instruction on your behalf. And I think that's a significant change in how we build and distribute software. That's from the builder's perspective. From the user's perspective, I think that is an interesting journey that we're on right now. I think the two things that I'm seeing happening is if you think of a normal distribution curve of workers, you have people that are right of the mean, people that are very productive, people that are sort of on the mean, the average spectrum, people that are average, and people that are still trying to figure it out. They are really on the lower end of the spectrum. These tools essentially move the mean to the right.
Mhm.
Right? This is basically like Lake Wobegon, where everyone is one off to the right, right? And I think this is what the tooling is doing, is moving the mean to the right. Things that people that are experts are going to use it in a certain way. There was an amazing study that was recently published that followed BCG consultants that were given access to large language models, and their performance was tracked. And you could actually see this sort of mean moving to the right, which is actually a great thing for sort of all of humanity, I think, because you can do a lot more with a lot less. And I think that's a good thing. Um, the second interesting aspect is specialization. I think specialization is sort of here to stay, but you see roles merging. So, we built an assistant, and it helped resolve a lot of case tickets, sort of things breaking, and those tickets that have, if you lost your internet, you probably write to Comcast. If those interactions were automated to a certain degree, we found that users do other things that are high value, right? So in essence, someone that is a service agent is now upselling product. So are they a service agent or are they a salesperson now? Well, the roles have merged, right? So this merging is happening because the tooling is enabling people to do that. So um, this is so the specialist can specialize while at the same time having tools do the role of a generalist, if you, right, if that makes sense. So I see, like, in the broader population, these are two big themes that we're seeing, is that in general, the mean is moving to the right, and um, tools are helping do the job of a generalist quite well, so that people can specialize and do what they do really well.
Are you concerned that some people may fall behind if they're not adopting AI and trying to kind of use that in their jobs to do better?
I am. I think
Yeah.
that is a concern. I think it is really important that we, and this is one of the things that Salesforce does extremely well is we want to we are working towards bringing this at scale to customers. We just had a conference called TDX where we taught thousands and thousands of people how to build a copilot, right? And
And
this
just
is,
so people, I don't mean to interrupt, so people understand when you say a co-pilot, is that when somebody's going to a Perplexity, a Claude, or a Google, or whatever, and then just putting in prompts and then following up with other prompts? Is that when you're saying co-pilot? Is that sort of what you mean?
yeah, sort of what I mean. Copilots is basically takes it a few steps further,
Okay.
which is imagine that imagine that someone built you an assistant that helps you do post-production editing of podcasts. That'd be nice,
I need that. So yes.
right? That would be nice.
Yeah.
Now you want to make sure that that is personalized and customized to you. It learns from you, and it's an assistant sitting there and actually does the right things because you instructed it to do the right things, but also because it has a semblance of an understanding of what good looks like in your world. That happens when you bring in data. So one of the things that we're doing with copilots broadly is we are enabling customers to bring in their data, to bring in their instructions, to bring in their actions. In your case, that would be help me edit this podcast. Here's a bunch of tools that I use, learn how to use them and do it for me. And then an interface which lets you look at it all and say, yeah, this did it for me. You want that experience to be interactive, so there's a co-pilot sitting right next to you that you're talking to. So that's what I mean by co-pilot. It brings together all the elements that you talked about, which is it brings together a large language model, the ability to instruct it, along with the set of actions that you want done in context of the data that you bring into the system.
So is it like this? So my co-host Rick, who's traveling, that's why he's not here, but he uses AI exactly the same for the podcast, where he was saying to me, Jack, I do like, all those little habits, and then he uses the AI to get rid of them so he could sound smarter than constantly saying like all those kind of things that we all do. So is that sort of like one small aspect of what you're talking about? By using those tools, you would have a better podcast because presumably the person doesn't have to worry so much about saying like, huh, because they know it'll be cut out, so they can
Exactly.
just talk for more freely without, because you know what, if you worry about how you're going to say things, you're maybe not going to be in the flow and say exactly what you want to say because you're scared about stumbling on your words. But if you know you have AI that's going to clean it up, then you're much looser.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
these are the kind of this is exactly the example of a tool that is personalized, and it'll be trained on data that is specific to your co-host, right? So it will
Mhm.
learn how to get the ums and ahs out better because it understands and has the data on that, on that prior.
And then you multiply it, because this is one example, because we're on a podcast, we're talking about it, but it can run the whole gamut of anything and everything, right?
Exactly. So yeah. So think of what will it take to train a good intern, right? And what would you like the intern to do? And how do you build systems that enable others to go build these sort of intern slash assistant technologies? That's what sort of the co-pilot
So how
story.
would that work? So let's say that's a good example. So you have, let's say you're hiring on your team an intern, and
Mhm.
you want to get that person up to speed really quickly. What would you do, or have the intern do, to start learning and understanding what they're supposed to do, their responsibilities, their job requirements?
That is a great way to think about it, right? What would you do? The first thing you'd do is you'd give them data to
Mhm.
learn your policies, learn your practices, how to documents and manuals on how to do A and how to do B. That's in the Copilot world, that's called data grounding. You would ground the Copilot engine, which is basically the brain, but you're feeding it data so it has context. So you do that. That's step one. Then what would you do next with an intern once they've read through this, they've understood it, they're going to come to you and say, like, give me something to do. And you'd be like, go do this. That's an instruction. But to fulfill that instruction, they need access to the systems that will enable them to do that. For example, in the case of this podcast, they will need access to the editing software.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's an action in the Copilot world. You register a set of actions with the Copilot so that when an instruction comes in, it has the ability to bring in the right tool in front of the user, in this case, the intern, right? So that's sort of the three-step process, which is you give it data so it understands and has context about your organization, your policies, your how-tos, your guides. You give the Copilot, just like you would an intern, a set of tools that they need to learn how to use. And then once that's done, you start giving instructions. Of course, like an intern, the Copilot can also go Ori, right? So you want to be able to be in the loop and say, oh, do it this way, or
Right.
I like this output, this is great. So in essence, the feedback loops that you would have with an intern are sort of similar. You would give it a thumbs up, a thumbs down. You might interactively get the job done by giving it, progressively more detail on what you want.
And I'd imagine you probably also want to have the human touch from time to time. So you, let's say for your intern, you may want to check in and have a conversation with the intern just to make sure you're on the same page and not just totally rely upon the AI, right? I imagine
That's exactly right. You always want to be safe, and those are the guardrails. That's the human in the loop guardrail, if you will, where you have an expert, in this case you, or your co-host, who is looking at the output before saying, hey, this is good or this is not good. And that is also a reinforcing signal to the machine learning model itself. The Copilot also learns, just like an intern would, based on these reinforcing signals. This was a good output, this was not a good output, and this is why.
And now for you particularly, did you start with or with a person behind Einstein and that Copilot? Is that your remit?
That's I shouldn't be the one taking any credit here.
Yeah, take the
We have
credit.
an
Why not? Go for it.
amazing team of people that we've hired, and we have an amazing team at Salesforce that builds all these technologies. We have a way to hire, and we have a way to bring them into the fold, and we have amazing.
I got a feeling you're being very diplomatic, but
No,
it
I'm being
sounds like you're
honest.
head with a lot of other smart people, but you're kind of the guy or one of the guys. Or
yeah, it's
one of
my
the
team
guys
that
and women.
does a lot of almost all the building of this the stack and this technology. We partner pretty closely with so mine is I have the AI organization, but we partner very closely with our data cloud organization, which is where all of that data that we talked about, to bring that intern up to speed on the data. That's where all the data gravity is for Salesforce. So we work very closely with our partners, our partners and peers there. And actions, Salesforce has an amazing actions framework in MuleSoft, which is where all of the actions get registered in an enterprise. So you bring that in as well, along with other ways to execute actions on the Salesforce platform. It helps that we've been doing this for a while. We've been working with customers, like I said, our 8-year journey to bring predictive AI to customers in a safe, secure, trusted manner continues. We have that trust, and we have built AI components in the flow of work. This is a new kind of AI, which we are bringing to customers as well.
And we say bringing customers would be, you would use it at Salesforce itself, but then let's say ABC Widget Company International needs, certain tailored copilots. You would offer that to, the ABC Widget Company, so they could kind of do all the work that they need to do and get, downplay the routine stuff that takes up a lot of time, and it'll free up, for higher level work. So you'll go out to offer that product, you ship it out to your clients who are going to use it for, I guess, a variety of reasons, depending on what. It could be automobiles, any type of industry.
You got it.
Yeah. Now let me ask you this. This is kind of taking a sidestep, if you don't mind. How does it feel where like you started way before everyone else and now AI has become the thing. Is it like, I don't know if you've ever had this feeling that there's like maybe a band, a
Yeah.
rock band that you enjoyed and you loved and no one really knew much about and it was yours. And then all of a sudden, everybody knows it. And you're like, oh man, everyone knows it. It's no big deal now. Is that like, how did it feel to start out doing data, having your own company, getting acquired by Salesforce, and now AI is ubiquitous? That's what everybody talks about. Like, is your mind racing for like how like are you able to process it even when you speak to your wife and kids about like how the heck did this happen?
Yeah, I mean, certainly there is a sense of wonder
Yeah,
and, but personally for me, I'm not hugely impacted by these hype cycles.
yeah.
But that said, I mean, the attention that comes with it isn't all bad because I think it focuses the ability to bring talent to bear on a problem that's of real significance. We have been able to hire some of the best people in the industry because of this change. That said, for me, I've always been all in on AI, even when it was not hot.
Was
Um,
it weird for you back then when you were doing AI and telling you're in Silicon Valley, right? And you're talking about AI and people giving you funny looks because like, why? What are you working on? What's up with you, Jayesh? Come on, do something else. Was that like back then? Did people just, you know, get rid
yeah,
of
there was definitely some of that. Like, are there some other greener pastures?
yeah.
There's certainly some of that, but I think for me personally, and many people, this is true for many people on my team, also very true for the industry at large. Often some of the best work happens outside of the limelight. Most of the foundational work happens, um, just when people aren't watching. As an example, a lot of the groundwork for these large language models, what the world sees as
Mhm.
amazing right now, was laid out way before the hype cycle started. The transformer paper, attention is all you need paper, which you can trace back a lot of the stuff to those two core things. There were transformer models before they were hot, like BERT and others. This has been going on for close to a decade.
Mhm.
And just outside the limelight. So it feels, I mean, personally, it feels amazing from an attention perspective, but I don't think me or many people in the industry that are building things, people that are builders, are necessarily hugely impacted by the hype cycle. And we know it'll come and go. AI used to be hot
Yeah.
back when we started as well, and then it was not so hard anymore. Now it's back hot. So we've sort of seen the cycle once, and you want to keep building is what you want to do.
You mentioned the hype cycle. So, what is that? Do you feel that it might, plateau? Because, like I've said, like the stock price of Nvidia, right, was skyrocketing. Now, not so much. Some of the other, AI stocks were coming down. Is that what you mean? Like you always have like you had during the pandemic, the meme stocks and all that,
Yeah.
stuff. So, is that kind of when you say the hype that you've been doing this for a long time, so you realize things get really hot, maybe get overheated, and then something else new comes along. Is that kind of
I
what
think
you
it
mean?
it gets overheated. Then you have the trough of disillusionment as people start
Mhm.
to look at this technology for real, and then after that comes the real growth. People that are deriving core value from the product. Um, I think there's two sort of waves. The first wave is when I think a lot of people that are selling shovels and pickaxes, for the gold rush
Mhm.
are sort of benefiting right now, right? Uh, but then the prospecting with those tools needs to happen in the river for the gold to emerge. That's the return on investment for a lot of these systems that we're building, a lot of chip manufacturing companies and stuff. And that's what we're seeing this year. This year, a lot of customers that we talk to are talking about ROI. They're deeply integrating this product into their data stack to build that intern like experience we talked about. They're deeply connecting the actions and they're using it every day. This is the hard yards that you need to do. And like personally, this is my shtick. I love taking big ideas, making them practical, taking the first step and then bringing it to large scale impact. Right, we are in the sort of, I'd say, stage 2 or stage 3 of a 5-6 step process where customers are implementing this. They're bringing the data together with the actions. They are trying to create these internal like experiences, and it's time to make it scale. It's time to make it work. They're deriving a ton of value from it. But how do you make that scale? How do you make that become the 8 billion predictive components into the 8 billion generative components? That's the journey we're on.
And part of the scale, like, what type of people are you hiring for your team? Are they software engineers? Are they AI, large language models, software, like data analysts, data scientists? What kind of, what kind of jobs are opening
All
with
of the above.
Salesforce? Yeah.
All of the above. And then I would add to that, you wrote a great article on the rise of the prompt
Mhm.
engineering thing. That is also very true. I think the nature of application teams, we're the AI team. So for us, we hire machine learning engineers, we hire software engineers that are able to craft experiences that bring this machine learning components to life. We have data analysts because a lot of work we do is about evaluating systems at scale, figuring out if a job that is being done right. So a lot of this involves a degree of data analysis. So we have data scientists and data analysts that are sort of doing that. And then we are backed by an amazing product team that goes talks to customers, make sure that systems that we build are being used, bring that feedback back to us, and sort of get that iteration loop going. That's sort of what the makeup of my AI team looks like. Going broader, we talked a little bit about what does the anatomy of a application look like. I think it looks very different. If you used to build you used to build um, an editing software for podcasts. Now you're not doing that. You're building an assistant that will use an editing software to get its job done. It's a different way of thinking about it, right? What will it take for companies to build that? I think that those teams are going to look different. They're going to have a prompt engineer. They're going to have someone that understands the domain space really well. They're going to have someone that has access to data, is able to curate the right data to bring into teaching this intern what to do. They are going to have access to all the tools and be able to say, we should use these 4 tools to go get this job done. So it's a very different way of how applications will be built in the future, or how assistants will be built in the future. And that's the new bit that I'm sort of seeing coming.
So people always wonder, how do some folks like yourself get to where you are now? Is it a little bit of luck? Is it being in the right place at the right time? Is it having the right skills at the right time in the right place? Is it that maybe you got a promotion that just really took you to the next level, or maybe had mentors or coaches? Is there any other things that people who are watching this could take away? Like, how can I get to that next level? How can I grow my career? How can I build it? Do I need a mentor? Do I need a coach? Do I need to be in Silicon Valley? Do I need to, you know what I mean? Yeah, you have any ideas? Like, even for yourself personally, was it like somebody who really made a break for you that got you to where you are?
Um, that's a good question. It's hard to sort of psychoanalyze oneself, but
Yeah,
if I were to hazard a guess, I'd say a ton of luck. I genuinely mean that.
yeah.
I think a lot of this is, I think intrinsically I'm a curious person, and I like to build new things. And then over time, I've picked up the skills to build them in such a way that they scale, that you bring that impact to the masses. And that's really what gets me going. So I think personally, for me, the journey has been driven a lot by curiosity. And I think me picking computer science is obviously luck. I was somewhat gravitating towards that, but good fortune that I was able to do that. Um, Certainly, a lot of fortunate breaks along the way. Definitely more mentors that I can care to count have been instrumental, in this sort of journey, I'd say. Um, I guess my insightful thing is like, um, if you were to ask for advice, I think it would be just like, I think curiosity is underrated. Um, uh, Grit is underrated. I think those are two key things that I feel like I pivot hard towards. So the kind of people we hire, um, you know, intrinsic desire to build things and to get them up and running at scale are sort of, core things that we look for.
I like that. It makes a lot of sense because if you're curious, you're gonna be always asking questions. You're always gonna be digging around. You're always gonna kind of try to learn, pick up some book to get some knowledge, watch a podcast to learn something new. And then, now the ball is rolling, and then you get
Yeah,
excited about something. And then people, you probably see this in your office all the time, that person who's excited about it, and you want to work with that person who's excited. You don't want
yeah,
the person
exactly.
who's like miserable and always cranky. You want that person who's always asking questions, who wants to learn, who wants to do something, who's putting in the hours. So I guess it becomes self-fulfilling because and then if you enjoy also what you do, right, which you certainly do, that helps out too, because then it's work, but it's not work like, you're digging ditches work, you're doing
Yeah,
stuff that you like. So then it's like a flywheel, right? Where it all just kind of comes into
absolutely.
place.
Absolutely. And you're connecting the dots too.
Yeah.
Connecting the dots on where you've been, what you've built, how does this impact what you built? You've built a lot of stuff that impact customers today. How can you take them on this new journey? I think you bring that curiosity, that learning, the building of new systems, into where you've been as well. I think those sort of connecting of the dots happens a lot faster. I'd also say, I think the one interesting thing that I've learned also along the way is just old-fashioned selflessness. Uh,
Mm.
People that see this as bigger than themselves usually tend to do a lot better. Um, you want that something bigger to lean on. To create massive, large-scale impact, it has to be bigger than you, right? So for many, it is how do I build systems that impact, at least at Salesforce, how do our thought process, how do you build systems that impact how people work? That's a really big problem to go solve. Technologies will come and go, but that's the problem you're trying to solve is how do you eke out that extra 15 minutes of productivity so that people can finish their work at a higher quality sooner. And sort of that degree of like having a mission that's bigger than you, certainly is helpful.
And when you say bigger than you, sometimes, because when I hear bigger than you, I immediately go to having meaning and purpose, which I find out for a lot of people in their careers, if they're able to have meaning and purpose, then they get some fulfillment, and they're excited and they're happy to do, happy at work, and they're motivated and they move forward.
Yeah.
And speaking of that, for your baby, Einstein Copilot, where do you see, this is not a fair question, but where do you see this going? Do you think every company in the world is going to be using it? Like, what's the big, you say big thing? How big do you think this is going to be? Um, yeah, as a product.
Um,
And you don't have to be humble. You could be,
I think, yeah, okay, I think it's going to be big.
yeah.
I think a lot of what we do at work is we use our imagination to um, set a goal for ourselves that is important. And then we take the goal and we break it down into tasks. Then we take the tasks, we break them down into subtasks. And then we go execute each of those subtasks. And when we do them right, we achieve our goal. Now, this is a
Mhm.
long iterative process. I make it sound like it's linear. It's um, I just think that the opportunity for something like a copilot to come make that iteration loop tighter, faster, is just a game changer. Because note that nothing I said in this is tied to any one job. It impacts. It's so foundational. Or is that it's true for every job. Literally every job can be resolved in the way I spoke. So if you have a tool that enables you to bring in the specificity, but of course, what I said is so high level so as to be useless, not insightful. But what if there was a tool, and there is a tool that enables you bring all this together along with context, right? What I just described was and a tooling that enables you to do that is exactly what would enable you to build that intern like function that we discussed earlier on the show.
Can I give it like a personal anecdote to your point? So that before coming on the podcast, I was using different AI platforms to check out, tell me about Jayesh, tell me about Copilot, tell me about, I keep putting prompts and prompts and prompts. And then pretty much I have like an outline of an article that I could use about yourself, what you do, your career history, your career journey, and all these other things. Whereas only a year ago, if it would take hours and hours to sift through Google and trying to find all this stuff. And I was able to get the data like in no couple minutes,
Yeah.
And now imagine, then that frees me up to do a podcast, and it frees me up to do some recruiting, and it frees me up to do other things because it's just so quick and so efficient. So
exactly.
This is just one example, right? This is just one of millions of examples of how
this is such a great example for another reason. Is because it clearly calls out that you had a goal. The AI system cannot give you one, right? You had a goal that you set up for yourself,
right?
And this is just a tool that was helping you resolve that goal and do the steps along the way and do it in such a way that it would be helpful to you, right? But it didn't set the goal for you.
Yeah, and I can see just multiplying it. I'm looking at it from the from a writer perspective, but then also I'm looking at it from a recruiter perspective, doing the same thing, how to find people much more quickly, and so on and so on. So to me, that's what makes it so exciting, this whole space, is that it's just changing dramatically, and it's making your life much easier and more productive. So
that's right.
Fantastic. So before we leave, anything else that you'd like to share, or anything maybe I didn't ask you that, anything any other cool things you're working on that you want to talk about?
We covered a lot of ground.
Okay. Well, excellent.
Yeah.
Well, this is great. You know what?
Awesome.
I really appreciate your patience in asking my third grade questions, but I feel by sometimes being the person to ask those questions, it helps because most people aren't really sure how it works, and most people are always awkward to ask because they're not sure and don't want to be embarrassed. So I think with this podcast, it's almost like a masterclass in what it's all about and how this works. And in just plain English, here, this is how why AI could help you with your job and career in advance, and make your life better, make your work life better. And I think for a lot of people who are just, you hear about it, but you're not, you're playing around with it, but I think it gives some really good sense of what it's all about and how it works and what goes on behind the scenes to make this happen. So I think this is great. I think I really appreciate, I know you're a busy man, you're building this up, you have a lot of stuff to do. So I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day. And,
it was my pleasure to be here, Jack. Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you very much. Well, take care now. Thanks.
Cheers.